Hey guys, Mr. Newman here. This is a quiz review, so as usual, I would recommend you trying all of these problems before watching the video, but still definitely watch the video to check your answers and see about more explanations. And these problems up here, actually some of these I'm taking straight from the textbook right here. You can practice more with those problems if you feel the need to practice more on certain kinds of these problems. So, first of all, 7.1, they want us to write a linear equation that models the situation. A kiosk sells magazines for $4 each and paperback books for $6 each. I'm underlining the words each and the things that are each. The owner would like to make $180 by the end of the day. So the linear equation for this, we're going to use 4x, because x is the number of magazines and you want to say that, and we're going to add that to 6y. Y is the number of books. We want to say that as well. So that will be how much money they make, and they want to make 180, so let's make that equal to 180. Notice this is in the form of ax plus by equals c. That's called standard form, and that's because I have two kinds of things I'm buying and they add up to another thing, so standard form is the best equation to use for that. So the question is, how many paperbacks books must the owner sell if no magazines are sold? Well, no magazines x. So that means x equals 0. I'm just going to plug in 0 for x, and I can figure out y. Now, as we're doing this, just a reminder, so y is 30. That means that the owner must sell 30 books if no magazines are sold. Just as a reminder, if you're going to graph it, this is the best way to find 2 points, is to plug in 0 for x and then 0 for y, and to connect those dots. And yes, you will be asked to graph on the quiz. So let's go on to scatter plots. For scatter plots, just a reminder, you want to press stat, then edit or enter. L1, the books will go in L1, and the grade will go into L2. Make sure you double check your work. I actually did this whole problem and found out at the end that I made a mistake. So I'll give you a way to check it. Once you type those in, remember stat, then calculate, then linreg. So stat, then overwrite one to calculate, and then down to the fourth one, linear regression. That's how you do run a linear regression. And I got y equals 1.71x plus 72.44. The way I checked my work was actually I plotted on the graph. And if you go to zoom and look for zoom stat, that will zoom in on the stats. And I saw one of my points was way off. So then I went back and looked and found that point, and noticed I typed in the wrong number. So it asks us to predict the grade of a student who read 7 books. Books is our x value from up there, so x must be 7, so I'm going to plug in 7 for x. When I calculate that, I get 84.41, so that must be the grade, or that is likely to be the grade, that's why I'm predicting, and 84.41 will be the grade of someone who reads 7 books, or a score. Alright, so for this next one, 7.3, linear inequalities, I'm going to solve negative 9x plus 3y is less than or equal to 6 and solve for y and show my work. Now, unless I asked for you to solve for y, you don't necessarily have to. Another way to graph this, we could plug in 0 for x and then 0 for y, but this problem did ask us to solve for y, so we need to get y by itself. So let us add 9x to both sides, and then I'm going to divide by 3. Pause right here. Notice that I'm not dividing by a negative. If I did, this right here would need to switch to be that way, okay? But we're dividing by a positive number, so we don't switch anything around. So y is less than or equal to 2, because that's 6 divided by 3, plus 9x over 3 is going to be 3x, because 9 divided by 3 is 3. So there's our equation. It's not quite in slope-intercept form, but we can switch it around, say 3x plus 2 instead. And I'm going to plug in 0 to see what the y will be. So that's 2. So 0, 2 is a point. Let's plug in 1 next. 1 is going to be 5. And if I plug in 2, I'm going to get 8. Well, that's off my graph over there to the right. So I'm just going to plot those 2 points. And I lastly need to ask, is this going to be a solid or a dashed line? Well, remember, or equal to means solid, so I'm going to include it. So I'm going to plot 0, 2, and 1, 5, and I'm going to make a solid line because of the or equal to. Now, I still need to shade one side because it's an inequality, so let's try 0, 0. And if we plug in 0 for x and 0 for y, we get 0 is less than or equal to 2. That is true, So yes, I want to shade that side, and that is going to be on the right side of that graph. So I'm going to shade that in. All right, and those are all the points that are solutions to the inequality. Last problem here. This is a word inequality problem. The fare for a taxi cab is $2.50 per passenger. I'm going to underline that, per, see the word per, and 75 cents for each mile, see the word each. So that gives me these both of the variables. A group of friends has $22 for a cab. Now, because we're doing passengers and miles, and both of those can change, I'm going to make X the number of passengers, and Y is going to be the number of miles. Also, this is going to be a good inequality to write down in standard form, AX plus BY equals C. Well, not equals because it's an inequality, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. So, $2.50 per passenger, so 2.5 times the number of passengers, X, plus 75 cents for each mile, so 0.75 times Y, and that is related to 22. Now, it's not equal to, we need to figure out which inequality is this. The key here is the word has, and you have to think about how does money work. Well, if we've got $22 or they have $22, they cannot spend more than $22. So $20 is the most they can spend. In other words, they have up to $22 to spend, or at most $22. So those numbers on the left, 2.5x plus 0.75y, that's how much they're going to spend. That needs to be less than or equal to 22. So less than or equal to. All right, now that I've got that, let's label passengers and miles, and I'm going to show you the other method here. Plug in 0 for x, and we solve for solve for y. Divide by 0.75, and you get y is 29.3. That's fine. The weird thing is, like, if you go back and think about this, 0, you can't have 0 passengers and go 29 miles. That doesn't make sense for a taxi fare cab. Or cab fare. So we're really just finding the boundaries of this, and we're going to connect the dots. Also, it's kind of silly to have 0 miles. If you put a bunch of people in a cab and go nowhere, that's kind of pointless too. So, but we're going to use this again as a boundary. So you plug in 0 for y, you get x is equal to 8.8, which also doesn't make sense because you can't have 0.8 people, but for the sake of drawing an accurate line, we want to keep that decimal. Now, let's label our axes, both with numbers and with our words. So x is passengers, y is miles. When x is 0, y is 29.3, and when y is 0, x is 8.8. So there are our 2 points. I do need to ask, is this going to be a solid or a dashed line? And you notice it's underlined, so it is going to be solid, and those are going to be connected. Lastly, we need to try a number. Let's try 0, 0. If you put no people in the cab and go no miles, that is just fine. So 0 is less than or equal to 22. Both of those make sense. So 0, 0 is included. So I'm going to sketch all the things underneath that line. So that means we could do any of those points, any of those number of passengers, and any of those number of miles. If there are 3 people in the group, how far can they travel by taxi? Well, we could estimate this from the graph. Notice if there are 3 people, that's right here, they could travel just 5 miles, they could travel 10 miles, they could travel 15, all that's fine. It seems to end right about maybe 18 or 19, just under 20. So let's do the math and figure out exactly where it is. Well, number of people is x, right? Passengers is x. So I'm going to plug in 3 for x and solve for y. Now I'm skipping a few steps here because I'm running out of space, but when you do that, y is less than or equal to 19.67. In other words, that's how many miles they'll be able to go. They can go up to that much. They can do less than that, but they cannot do more than that. All right, and ideally I would write that out in a sentence, but again, I ran out of room. Thank you for watching, and I hope you're ready for the quiz.